Well, hello there. Greetings. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here, especially because you have so many options to inform yourself and to listen to content surrounding, well, any astrological or spiritually oriented subject, and especially something as volatile and high energy as an eclipse season that is also concurrent with the Chinese New Year, Year of the Fire Horse. So, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. And especially if you're new here and you've stopped by because this content is piquing your interest, thank you. Again, you have so many options out there in the interweb to listen to this content, to inform yourself, like I said, to educate yourself. So thank you for stopping by. So we are going to go over the very generalized astrological themes moving through this next 6 months, the first half of the year of the fire horse. We have as of this morning, so it's almost 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the 17th of February. We just had our new moon in Aquarius. It also is the beginning of the Chinese New Year, the year of the fire horse, and it was an annular or ring of fire solar eclipse. So today in this broadcast, in this transmission, as it were, we're going to talk, like I said, very generally about the overall theme, looking at the temporal map of the next 6 months, the entirety of the eclipse cycle, of course, and the first half of this year of the fire horse. And just get an idea of the ebbs and flows, when things are really going to peak in terms of the intensity of this year, when there may be some breaks in the waves, so to speak, and we have a chance to catch our breath, maybe. We'll see. I mean, it does seem like there is a wave pattern that is going along with this eclipse cycle. We're going to look I wouldn't say very deeply, but certainly more deeply at the eclipse window or portal itself from this new moon in Aquarius, the annular ring of fire solar eclipse, and then our total lunar eclipse on the 3rd of March. So that window is a really important time to pay attention to. The issues that we are responding to, the things that come up, that we're processing, that we're engaging with, that we're considering, all the different things as humans that we do, going through as conscious co-creators through our lives, presumably and hopefully. When we are in the midst of this eclipse window, which happens twice a year, it's kind of like a time capsule because what is going on in terms of the relationship between the different aspects of ourselves and how they manifest out into reality, and then how we respond to those things, right? The give and take of creation. It is at such a deep level because of the nature of the eclipses themselves, and we'll do a little bit of review of what makes an eclipse, and what those different bodies, those different positions that are involved in this process, what they mean astrologically, so you can get an idea, oh, that's why it has to do with soul oriented growth and evolution, because that's what eclipses really mark. Like twice a year, there is a time where the path of the moon or the lunar orbit, when it crosses the ecliptic plane, when we have new and full moons at that point, that's what designates the eclipse. And the nodes of the moon in astrology, especially evolutionary astrology and Vedic astrology, you're looking at the trajectory and the direction of the soul's growth in this particular incarnation. So what happens during this time period, these 2 weeks, and really the whole lunar cycle, but really between one eclipse and the other, the things that are going on become deeply embedded, like I said, like a time capsule. They're things that are going to get buried and have a gestation period that is deeper than our conscious awareness, and will start to make its way up through the layers as time progresses. So we can also look at the last eclipse cycle, which is ending right now as we move into a new one, and just do a bit of a review of what those energies represent. So those are all things that are going to be much more individualized, right? This is important for you as an individual to understand your astrology, to understand and pay attention to how things progress through your life, and the intuitive impressions, the synchronicities, the messaging. If you are, in fact, a person that is consciously and with some awareness moving through your life as a spiritual being, then it's important to kind of pay attention to how things have progressed and what you've learned from them, and then apply them to this next cycle. So we are going to look a little bit deeper at this next 2 weeks, normally, which is what we would normally do in a new moon forecast, look at the main themes of the 2 weeks from new moon to full moon. But knowing that in this instance, we are looking at something that is much more deep and karmic that will start to surface down the road. So before we get into all of the astrology, we're going to do a little bit of review of what an eclipse is mechanically. Look at the eclipse map. It's actually happening over Antarctica, the solar eclipse. I think that's pretty interesting considering everything that surrounds Antarctica, all the mystery and all of the theories about what's going on under there. So to have this ring of fire solar eclipse in Aquarius, that seems a little more than a little, I wouldn't say suspicious, but something we really want to pay attention to. Before we get into all of those things there, I just want to take a moment to address something that I've already brought up. So a number of you did comment on the last video that I put up, which was just a little bit of a check-in about what the Schumann resonance was doing and just the last bit of energy of the year of the snake, the last eclipse cycle, because it's not just a lunar cycle or a balsamic moon that we've just come out of. It's multi-layered, right? You're having a lunar cycle that just ended, you're having an eclipse cycle that just ended, and you had a full astrological year, the Chinese year, also ending and turning over. So it feels like a lot. And even without any type of influence surrounding that, there is a type of, it's just very taxing on the nervous system. And I will say before we get into the astrology that this 2 weeks, there is a lot of volatility. There's a lot of momentousness in this next 2 weeks that I'm going to point out. And we have a Mercury retrograde that's going to start. So this 2 weeks is going to have a lot still going on. And like I said, the resonance and the imprint energetically of this eclipse window is going to manifest itself way more into the summer. So the next eclipse cycle turns over in mid-August. And what I will say is that this energy is going to peak dramatically in July. And we will look at that in the chart. But I do want to just touch on some things and bring up some stuff that came into my awareness just yesterday. So I talked a little bit about the Schumann resonance and some of the weird stuff that it was doing, and people commented either on the video or personally or just having experience, because I see bodywork clients every single day and they tell me about all of the things that are bothering them, their aches, their pains, their headaches, their migraines, their emotional stuff, their gastrointestinal discomfort, right? I get it all. And so many people shared that they had all kinds of strange symptoms last week. And it was, for the most part, in alignment with this weird amplification of the Schumann. So I will say, too, that the sun and the solar activity is pretty minimal. I mean, there have been some solar storm activity, kind of like little blurbs here and there, but for the most part, it's been pretty quiet. And so to have that large amplification of the Schumann last week really caught my eye. I'd been feeling it build for a little while, and I wasn't surprised to see it. So people had commented that they were having all these symptoms. Well, yesterday, this just really solidified it for me personally. And then I'm going to share an article that I saw just yesterday that really just I don't even know. I'm curious what people's response is. Let's put it that way. So yesterday I was seeing a client who I've been seeing probably for about a year. I see her monthly. She's a very sweet young lady. She's in her first year of college. And she came to me because she has frequent headaches and migraines. And so they tend to be much more pronounced now that she is in college and she's being very diligent about what she's studying. and she gets these frequent headaches and migraines. So she came to me to start addressing that. Well, after about, I'd say 9 months to a year, really started to get a handle, not with just the massage, but with craniosacral therapy. So she came to me yesterday and she said, I've been really good about, I haven't had any headaches at all. And I'd seen her a month prior. So a month from the last treatment, she was headache free, which that's a huge win in my book. And especially like being in the midst of a semester and having this as like a regular thing. So she said, but for some reason last week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I just had this headache. And it was after school. It wasn't like during my school day or anything like that. And she has other types of stress related to, this is she has exams that are the first exams with the professors in this new semester. So she gets a little nervous trying to feel it out. How do they grade? What are the expectations? That's all pretty normal, right? But she was like, I don't know where I haven't had any headaches. And then out of nowhere, it's just like one day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I just had these headaches. And then it was gone. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Of course, I was in a position to not really like dive into, what's the Schumann resonance and explaining what frequency, amplitude, and quality are and what's extremely low frequency and how our brains are entrained to that. But it really just brought it home for me that, this person was having these significant symptoms at the same time that this was happening. And then just as easily just drifted away, right? They just stopped happening after everything started to calm down. So for those of you who did share or just had your own experiences and maybe you didn't share, but you're like, yeah, I totally felt that. I mean, this really confirmed, not that I needed the confirmation, but it was more about sharing it with you to be like, yes, there is even more confirmation that something is going on there, right? That is having a very profound impact and influence on people in their physicality, right? And it's electromagnetic. So I wanted to share that. Now, this came up in my social media feed yesterday, and it just was like, what in the actual F? That's actually what I texted somebody. I was like, what in the actual F is this? I'm really curious to see what people think about this. I have my own opinion about what I think this is about. So let me, it was an article in the Daily Mail. Let me see if I'm going to bring it up here. This, it's really not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. What's funny is just like, it just seems so ridiculous that this would even be happening that I feel like there's something else entirely behind it. So this is an article that I found on Telegram, and then I found the actual link to the article itself from the Daily Mail. And this says, scientists, in case you're not looking, I'll read you the headline. Scientist gives himself brain damage by testing a secret audio weapon on himself in attempt to disprove Havana syndrome. Now, if you're not familiar with Havana syndrome, I really encourage you to, put your thinking cap on and Google it and do a little bit of research and get an idea of what Havana syndrome is. But basically, in a nutshell, the Cliff Notes is that it references a number of different debilitating effects that affected some diplomats in Cuba. I can't remember exactly the time frame, that they couldn't identify what was causing it, right? And there's, but people who study things like electronic warfare and electromagnetic weaponry, I don't know if that gets me off of YouTube or not. So I'll try to be mindful about how I phrase things. These are all symptoms of exposure to frequency-based technology, let's say, right? And so this was in Norway, and this scientist built this device and used it on himself to be like, see, there's nothing wrong with there's no such thing as Havana syndrome, and then he gives himself brain damage, which again, in the article, if you read it, and I'll link it somewhere, either in the description box or in the comment section. If you if you read the article, it was like, and it prompted a visit from the White House and the Pentagon, because they were like, how did you get this technology? You must have stole it. Anyway, there's, whatever you think about all of that. So I was like, very interesting. So between that and the way that it was the weaponry when they went into Venezuela. And if you're paying attention to this at all, when they went into Venezuela and they captured Maduro, there was a use of a type of weaponry that completely just stopped everybody in their tracks, and they were bleeding out of their orifices, and they were vomiting blood, the whole thing, right? And President Trump continued to talk about this weapon of just like, yeah, it just shut everything down, and he called it a discombobulator. So between that and something like this, it really seems suspicious to me that these are not just like one-offs, and there is some measure, in my opinion, and I'm curious what people think about this, some measure of disclosure about this coming out now, because this is like kind of ridiculous, that who in their right mind would think that being exposed to microwave radiation directly to your brain, it's like putting your head in the microwave and being like, there's nothing bad gonna happen. It seems ridiculous for a person who is a professional researcher and scientist. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but it just seems kind of weird. Anyway, between that and the fact that I had this client who doesn't know anything about this stuff being like, yeah, I just got these migraines. I hadn't had them all month. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just got migraines for 3 days, or headaches 3 days in a row. And then they went away. And she did kind of have a headache yesterday too, and we did the craniosacral work along with the massage, and she was like, yep, it's gone. So I have a lot of success with craniosacral for people that have consistent headaches and migraines. A lot of times they'll come in with the headache and it'll be gone by the time they leave. And that is directly, I mean, the massage is great and all, but the craniosacral is focusing directly on the tissue that surrounds your central nervous system and houses your cerebral spinal fluid. And if that in any way is impacted negatively, it will affect lots of things in your physicality and your health and wellness. And headaches and migraines are one of the bigger ones because you do a lot of work on the cranial bones and the sutures that are connecting them all. And when you can release those and decompress them, people get a lot of relief. And two, what was found when this system was really being developed as a modality by Dr. Lepledger is that there is a change in voltage in the body when you restart the craniosacral rhythm. There's a way to kind of like reboot it with a type of technique. It's called a still point. And so you're changing the voltage in the body. So again, it goes back to there is an electromagnetic component to all of these things. So anyway, that felt really important to share coming into this period because, whoa, so I've done a number of personal forecasts now for this fire horse and this eclipse window, and it doesn't matter what, if you're a fire goat, if you're a water rat, if you're an earth dragon, if you're like myself, which is an earth horse, this year, and really it seems like it's going to peak big time into July, is carrying the potential of a lot of burnout because the fire horse has just got so much like energy and charisma and drive to accomplish that if you have not conditioned your nervous system to be prepared for this year, especially this 6 months, and I would say this end of May through the summer, peaking in July. Not to say that what's happening right now isn't going to have some stuff going on. It really will. But again, it's happening within the eclipse window itself, as we're going to see. So it's really going to be expressed a lot more come July into August. If you don't have your nervous system like really fine-tuned, your capacity to basically downshift when you need to, this year is going to leave people in the dust. And that's one of the things that I've been sharing with other people, the general message that's come through. So no matter what your astrology is, this potential exists for everybody. Now, depending on your Chinese astrology and your Western astrology and all of the starseed stuff involved as well, that's going to have an influence on how things are expressed. But the general theme here for this fire horse year is that it is incredible momentum. It is like a horse shooting out the gate at a race, right? And if you, like I said, if you're not prepared, if that horse is not conditioned, you are left in the dust. Or if you are not conditioned properly and you take off the risk of injury and burnout is very significant. We're going to go through some shit this year. There's no doubt about it, right? And like I said, it seems like it's really going to peak in July. It's the 250th anniversary of the U.S. There are some really significant transits that'll be happening during that time that are lined up with the U.S. natal chart. The eclipse itself, right now, the solar eclipse is in conjunction with the U.S. natal moon. There's there's lots of overlaps, and I've talked about it before. So it's really important that if you haven't already gotten yourself into a position, whatever it is that brings your nervous system to a place where it can handle the upgrade, because the upgrade has happened. That's the thing about this eclipse. It may not fully manifest itself until later down the road, but we're already exited the chrysalis, if that makes sense, right? This is about exiting the chrysalis and going through the metamorphosis and then applying that new version of ourselves to the world. And that can be very discombobulating. Wow, I didn't even plan on saying that, but that's exactly what the word that came through. So it can be very discombobulating, and there's such a huge potential for burnout this year. Other things too are, just things really solidifying with Saturn and Neptune coming into conjunction in Aries. So Jupiter's going to station direct in March, and like I said, July is very intense. So I really encourage you. Of course, I'm biased because I'm a professional body worker and have been for a really long time. It's my bread and butter. And I know for me personally, getting my body work and my healing work on a regular basis is really essential. So whatever it is, you're going to yoga class, whether you're getting a massage, whether you are getting Reiki, whether you're going to acupuncture, whether if it's, just getting out in nature regularly, making it a practice and a discipline, it's really, really important, because it's going to be how we navigate successfully through this next 6 months to a year, because there's just going to be the frequency is already elevated, and it's going to manifest into quote unquote reality, material reality, and how we respond to that is really a function of what's going on inside of us. So a little bit of just like, here, this is what an eclipse is, just in case you're new to the idea, right? And you're like, why does this even matter? So first I'm just going to share the eclipse map real quick, just so you have a visual of the fact that the solar eclipse in particular is only going to be visible unless you're, out in the ocean here, right? So this is South America, this is Australia, maybe there's some random island out here, but for the most part, it's going to be only visible right now to folks that are stationed in Antarctica. So that's the map for the annular solar eclipse. And it's annular, it's a ring of fire, which means it's not exactly lined up perfectly with the nodes. So there is that ring of fire, or that little bit of sunlight that peeks through. It kind of looks like an eye. It's very interesting. So that I wanted to share with you. And then also too, just so you understand what we're looking at here, what the nodes are, what does this all mean? So the lunar orbit, right, around the smiling planet right here, the north node is the ascending node, and the south node is the descending node, right? And so in evolutionary astrology, Vedic astrology, the north node is the head, the south node is the tail of the dragon, the north node is the trajectory of the soul, where we're going, where we're moving to in order to evolve at a soul level. The south node is what we leave behind, what we've mastered, what needs to be shed away. Everybody has the axis of the nodes in their natal charts. It shows you exactly what I just said, the soul's journey. And because you're talking about something that is so deeply embedded, way deeper than your own personality, way deeper than even your subconscious, it can really drive you, just like a dragon is driven in a lot of ways. So that's something else. There can be a compulsion there that goes along with it. So when the nodes are the place where the lunar orbit crosses the ecliptic plane, right? That's the solar orbit. So when the new and full moon happens at this location, then we get eclipses, because that it's the moon and the sun are lined up longitudinally and latitudinally when they reach this node point, right? And so when we have eclipses, this is where the trajectory of the soul crosses the solar plane, right? And the sun in astrology represents that illuminated self, right? How we express ourselves, what our passions are, the center of our own solar system, just like our own sun. And so it is a trigger for incredible growth at a soul level coming into full expression, but it takes that time of that 6-month period. And so again, things don't happen right away like they would in a normal lunar cycle, where it's like a 4-week cycle of up and down. It's something that's way deeper, something that needs time to gestate. And like I said, it's kind of like a time capsule. You kind of put these things away and you just let them sit, and they will find their way back to the surface come July. Big time. Now let's get into the chart, because I don't want to belabor this too much, because there's so much here, and we will be coming back around every new and full moon to talk about what's going on. Certainly the Catalyst membership, we're doing our readings every other week as well to fill in and to supplement the astrology with pure intuitive and energetic readings for us. And of course, if you have premium membership, then you're getting your own reading every month. So we'll be coming back around to address things as they come up. So I'm not going to belabor every single transit, but what I am going to show you is the general theme here. So I'm going to bring up the chart of the current chart, and we're going to look, if you are in fact looking. If you're not, it's okay. But I tend to think that the visual of the chart itself is very helpful to get an idea of what's going on. So let me share the screen here so you can see. And if there's anything that you're going to look at in this video, this would be probably the thing that I would recommend that you actually look at. So here is the chart for today at the time of the solar eclipse, which is 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. One thing I will say as we go through this, put a little pin in this, and this is not to exclude anybody else astrologically. Remember, everybody has every zodiac sign in their chart, because depending on where your ascendant is and where all your other house cusps are, it will designate, all of the signs are represented for the most part in everybody's chart. And so knowing where Virgo Pisces, which is where the nodes still are, and Leo Aquarius, which is where they're going, knowing where that's at in your chart will give you a good idea of where these energies are really going to surface, right? Where they're going to manifest, what area of life, and each house represents an area of life. However, I would say, and this is based on my readings with clients, my own experience, and certainly just my own pure intuitive impressions as I look at the charts, go through the general themes of the next 6 months, the people who are really going to be influenced, I think, the most with this next 6 months are the Virgo Pisces and Leo Aquarius people. So Sun, Moon, and Rising in particular. If you have nodes, if your natal nodes are in these positions, I definitely have a Pisces Virgo nodal axis in my natal chart. That's kind of ending for me now because it's more towards the other end of things. These folks are going to be feeling it the most. And that's, I think, because the nodes themselves will be shifting out of Virgo Pisces. And by the time we get to August, they will be in Aquarius and Leo. In fact, they will be at the same degree as this new moon solar eclipse, right? Which is 28 to 29 degrees Aquarius. So there is a transition that's also happening through this eclipse cycle. Now, the nodes of the moon have about an 18-month cycle where they move through a zodiac sign or a set or pair of zodiac signs. They're always in opposition to each other. If you remember that image we just saw, right? The ascending node and the descending node. So you get about 18 months. So you get roughly about 3 eclipses give or take. You get three eclipses in a pair of zodiac signs, an axis of zodiac signs, and usually one of those eclipses is in the set of signs that the nodes are going to transition into, and that's the case with this particular eclipse. The new moon is in the zodiac sign of Aquarius at 28 to 29 degrees, but the nodes of the moon are still in Pisces, Virgo, and the full moon total lunar eclipse will be in the signs of Pisces and Virgo. So there's a transition happening, and there's also a transitioning happening out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. Now, the thing about Aquarius, it's really important, I feel like, this came through really strongly, and this is not exactly like this revelatory, like, oh yeah, I never thought about it this way, but just kind of remind yourself, if you are familiar with astrology and what the archetypes of all these signs represent. You know, in Pisces, it's really easy to kind of get lost in the delusion, in the fog, to basically, just get lost in fantasy land about anything, right? You can delude yourself. You can, just be in this really diffused, non-differentiated, boundaryless world, which is great for being inspired. It's great for spiritual connection or even humanitarian, ideal connection, right? But it also is it's the bardo, right? It is that realm that is everything and nothing. And so it all exists there. And it's really easy to hide in the Pisces realm. It all comes to fruition, right? The 12th house is the house of endings, which is the Pisces house. Like, eventually all comes to a head. But Aquarius is a little different. You can't hide in Aquarius, can you? You can't hide, and no one can really hide from you, right? Because you are connected to the collective consciousness as it is. And that means that you're connected to everything else. And so, as you can see, especially since the Leo full moon that we had, with the Epstein files being released at the extent that they are, how that has rippled out into the social and cultural and even political realm, right? People are resigning, and there's blah, blah, the whole thing, right? And all of the focus on it. And again, Leo Aquarius, there's that axis. Ever since then, things are not as easy. You can't hide in Aquarius. And as the nodes shift, especially the North node moving into Aquarius this year with this fire horse, I mean, it is not only is there a real drive to get to this place of like full knowing and transparency, it is going to be with this momentum of the fire horse behind it that is just really, there's just no room, and there's no break, right? It's just going to be kind of an endless stream of disclosures on, in my opinion, in every realm. And if you are not ready for it, if you're not prepared, if your nervous system is not prepared, it's going to be a very difficult year. And all the general forecasts that I've done, and my own included. And if you're curious, just like a general, like, what's it look like for me? You figure out, it's really easy. So you go to the search engine, you type in what year, what animal am I in Chinese astrology when born in year X? It'll tell you, you are this. And then you say, what's the fire horse here going to yield for blah, blah, blah. So Matt, you're a fire monkey, right? You're born in 1956. So you're a fire monkey. What is the fire monkey? What's the year of the fire horse going to be like for the fire monkey? And you'll get all kinds of like AI, aggregated information from various sites. It just gives you an idea, but every single person that I've read for, including myself, is just like, it's very volatile, it's very high energy, and burnout is a real challenge here. So, but I think Leo, Aquarius, Virgo, Pisces people are really at the cutting edge, at the leading edge of this, just because of the shift of the nodes in our signs, basically. So that's pretty substantial, just in general, but for those signs in particular. I'm not sure where that was going. I kind of got lost in the Chinese astrology thing. However, what I'd like to share with you is the general theme. So again, then we'll get back to this. If there's anything you're going to look at, I would say we're going to look at 6 months. Actually, what we're going to do is month to month. So we're just going to do month to month, and I'm going to show you how the astrology chart starts to unfold here. And things will be, still, there'll be things happening in March, okay? Jupiter is going to station direct. Mercury will be retrograde at least through the first half of March, right? Neptune and Saturn during this eclipse window are going to be conjunct exactly at 0 degrees and 44 minutes on the 20th. So that's just 3 days from now. Mars and Uranus are going to be in a square during this 2-week period. So we'll go back and talk about that because that's going to be really important to talk about, just the volatility of this next 2 weeks. But if we just go month to month, so it's seeming okay. We're mid-March. Now we're mid-April. There's some stuff. Things are moving into Aries. The Sun and Chiron are conjunct, and Pluto's doing its Pluto thing. Jupiter is now direct. Uranus is still in Taurus. And then we get to mid-May. Oh, that's interesting. Things are starting to have bolder lines. That's very interesting. What else is going on? By mid-May, Pluto will be retrograde. Okay. Mars and Chiron will be conjunct. Whew. Oh my gosh. Chiron is coming into Taurus this year, by the way. So that's another big thing to keep an eye out for. Uranus by mid-May will have already moved into Gemini. You can bet that that's going to hold something in, substantial coming from Taurus into Gemini. Now it's happened once before, but it's not going to come out of Gemini this time, I think. So that's mid-May, and we get to June, which is the solstice period. Things are still looking pretty bold, and then we come into July. Now, I really want to show you July as a whole, week to week, because it's just insane. Especially the 4th of July. Talk about volatility. Mars and Uranus will be conjunct on the 4th of July. Okay, it's 250th anniversary of the U.S. natal chart. The nodes of the moon will be at 0 degrees. In galactic astrology, no matter what the sign is, 0 degrees is the crack between worlds, okay? This is where the veil, it's not so much the veil is thin, but the crack is where you're able to, straddle both, the astral and the physical, for instance. So that's going to be, and as you can see here, Chiron has moved into Taurus by this point. And so it's making a direct aspect, a favorable aspect to the nodes at 0 degrees. This is going to be a pretty substantial and potent moment. Jupiter will have moved into Leo at 0 degrees and squaring Chiron. So by the time we get to July, it's just going to be endless. 1 week after the next, it just bold lines, bold lines, bold lines. And for the most part, it's very favorable. All these blue lines represent harmonious connections, either foundational like trines, or they have to do with sextiles, which are transformational, but they're harmonious, right? They don't transform as a result of friction like you get with the red lines, which are squares and oppositions. But through July, it really starts to peak. As you can see here, this is a big one. This particular, and as we come into Leo season in particular, the sun coming home to Leo, there's a lot going on here. Neptune will have stationed retrograde at this point. Pluto will be retrograde at this point. This aspect of Sun Jupiter conjunct is going to be at the Beehive cluster, which for those of you who had the star seed and galactic readings and you have 6-7 degrees in your natal chart, this is a marking that is really important, and it is the north node of the U.S. natal chart. So when Sun and Jupiter are conjunct here at the Sun's home territory in late July, you can bet there's going to be some sort of activation happening here. So once we get into August, it's not like it slows down too much, but it slows down enough, and we will be wrapping up this eclipse cycle. But also keep in mind that we'll still be in the year of the fire horse. So if there's any takeaway from this 6-month cycle here, I would say that it really peaks in July. And what is going on in this next 2 weeks is going to be something that really shows its hand in July. So it's important to pay attention to what's going on right now for yourself and how you are managing your nervous system. Because if your nervous system is out of whack now, just imagine what July is going to be like if you don't do anything to get it, get it to a point where you're able to handle the upgraded energy. And the upgraded energy is already here, right? That's part of the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis. So I want to share let me close this out here first. Let me share some of my notes here about the fire horse, the solar eclipse, the Sabian symbols, the astrology of the new moon in general, so you can kind of get an idea of like the type of energy we're working with. And we'll look at some, again, kind of the main things that are happening between now and the full moon lunar eclipse. And I would say even into the vernal equinox. Okay, so 29 degrees Aquarius in terms of Sabian symbol language is, in fact, a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, and it represents the capacity to transform the character of one's consciousness by radically altering the structural patterns of everyday living and the types of relationship one enters into. Because remember, Leo is the opposite of Aquarius. So Leo is all about our own individual passions, expressions, our joys, our thrills, our excitements. It's all about us individually. Aquarius is all about us, as a collective. So the relationships we enter into have an impact on the frequency of that collective, whatever that is. If it's a relationship, it's a family, it is a society, the resonance, the frequency, right? If you look at the sign for Aquarius, it's those two wave functions. And in unison, really, because when it all comes together, it's just one pattern. And so there may be, harmonics, there may be dissonance in some areas, but ultimately it is a pattern that we're all picking up on together. So the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis as the degree of this solar eclipse and the beginning of this fire horse here really suggests that we've already, we've shed the skin now. We are coming out of the chrysalis, and yes, it's at a soul level. So it's not really going to emerge into something we recognize as a change until, I would say, July into August, right? We're going to start feeling it probably come June, but it's going to be July. So let me, a couple more notes here. Certainly metamorphosis, the potential ability of every human to participate in a higher realm of evolution after emergence from a critical state of transition. So I would say again that the critical state of transition is something that has been established at the soul level and is going to take time in order to surface as something manifest, right? Now, again, it's conjunct the U.S. natal moon as well. And if I remember correctly, in the U.S. natal chart, the moon is in the third house, which is, how we adapt to our environment. So we've gone through the changes at this level collectively and individually, whether we like it or not. And it really is going to have a lot to do with how we walk through that initiation. So this represents an initiation into a higher realm of conscious existence, right? It's already happened. Along with that is Venus in conjunction with, speaking of the nodes, with the North Node. You can see Venus and the North Node conjunct at 9 degrees Pisces. Now, this is making it much more palpable, very visceral, because Venus represents that which we actually value quite physically, materially. And that could be actual material resources and possessions, but it also means relationships and that which we put our energy into creating. So Venus meeting the North Node right at the eclipse also brings this this sense of value and meaning to the need to really mobilize our energy and skill. And, and there's this kind of, it's interesting because you don't think about a competitive spirit when you think about Pisces. But if you think about Pisces as the nature of the whole, then it does make a lot more sense to have this competitive spirit, this drive, and this energy for success in a social performance, right? Something that you give yourself to for the sake of the whole, right? So a lot of people in high leadership positions, admirals and generals, they tend to be Pisces people. And that's because they identify themselves with the whole and give themselves to the whole, or give their service, right? Their service is that Virgo energy, which is opposite of Pisces. So right out the gate, we have this initiation that has been consecrated basically with this solar eclipse at the soul level. And you have Venus that is involved in this conversation, making it much more palpable, making it something that we really value as well. So that's a good thing. I mean, it really kind of just puts that sense, that stamp of I don't want to say approval. That's not the right word, but it there is a recognition of this, the importance and the value of this moment, right? To carry us through the next 6 months. Now, the 20th is something that is really important. And this is a moment, I've been talking about this, I'm sure so many astrologers are talking about it. It's not like it's an important moment. So you see that Saturn and Neptune come into a conjunction exactly at 0 degrees, 44 minutes. Now, I did a bit of little research and found that the last occurrence of this conjunction at the vernal equinox, which is 0 degrees of Aries, occurred in the 5th century BCE. And the thing that really stuck out to me about this year in particular was, surrounding it is all this Neo-Babylonian, Near East kind of jockeying for power and position. But specifically in 593 BCE is a reference to Ezekiel, and number one is prophecy about the Israelites need to get their crap together or they're going to lose Jerusalem, which is what happened. And then also, I mean, there were plenty of prophecies around this time because this was like the back end of his life. I think within 2 years, he had transitioned, he had passed away. The other thing was his vision of the fire wheel in the sky. That really, that also really grabbed my attention. So the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees Aries is solidifying. It's giving a structure to this brand new energy that is just now emerging. With Neptune having been here for a minute now, we felt it. We had a sense of it. Maybe we had more of a glamorized sense of it. Maybe we couldn't see it that clearly. Maybe it was kind of bobbing up and down, but hadn't fully risen out. Well, Saturn coming into conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees Aries is going to formalize it. It's going to solidify it. It's going to, now talk about a stamp. It's going to be like the gavel coming down. Okay. So this is happening within the next couple of days, and it's already building. Saturn has already come into Aries. So it's not like we aren't feeling that already. It's just when they meet exactly lined up, it will have that kind of structured, formal gavel type of energy coming right after this eclipse. So that's something to pay attention to as well. Where is 0 degrees Aries in your chart? That's going to give you a pretty good idea of what to pay attention to. So, and then beyond that, we're going to have, like I said, a Mercury retrograde on the 26th. Now it's already in its shadow. And the thing that really is important to pay attention to, I think, with this retrograde is the fact that it's going to station direct exactly where the North Node is now and where Venus is now. So again, this 9 degrees of Pisces, where the North Node is, where Venus has just conjunct, where the sun will be conjunct as Mercury is stationing retrograde, and it's going to meet Venus, but we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. Actually, it'll probably come up more in the Catalyst energy reading. Anyway, this degree about this jockey spurring the horse, right? We're in this year of the fire horse, and what is a jockey? I mean, it is the person that is responsible for not just riding the horse, but steering the horse, spurring the horse on, like managing the horse in the race, right? This is where Mercury is going to retrograde back too. So it's important to realize that as much as there is this value placed upon this right now, we have this eclipse, we're having a lunar eclipse that's coming. And the fact that the sun will also be meeting this place as Mercury is stationing direct, it really suggests to me that this is a time for internal, reflection about what this means and what our capacities are. And maybe there's more to consider about how we do this and what our capacities are moving forward. So that's the other thing, is that, there's all this energy of like, let's go, right? Because it's this fire horse energy, the butterfly out of the chrysalis, but this Mercury retrograde, especially where it is stationing retrograde, which is about, giving everything to a process. If you've ever, just how much it actually drains a person to, it's like a medium. Actually, that's a Sabian symbol. It's not even like it. A medium giving a seance. And so the idea is that you become the vessel for these spirits or whatever to come through, and it just like drains the medium, right? We have to, if we want to give ourselves over to this process, this Mercury retrograde is going to give us this an opportunity, I think, through the end of February into March and into the vernal equinox, to really consider like what our resources are and where we need to shore things up, right? And that can be very difficult in Pisces, because it's just like you can just waste your mental energy on daydreaming and fantasy. And this Mercury retrograde, thankfully, is going to be like, okay, like what's real and what isn't, right? What is delusion and what is reality? And I think that's going to be this is going to be a really important time to consider these things. And it will be difficult in some ways with, all of these connections to the North Node at this point, because like I said at the beginning, the North Node, the head of the dragon, there's a compulsion there. There is I'm getting there by hook or by crook type of thing. And then so to have Venus, to have the sun at this point as well. And then on top of that, Mars square Uranus. Talk about volatility, all right? It's very volatile, and it's often described as expect the unexpected. And so there'll be something sudden coming out of the woodwork here, triggering a sudden collision, right, between your drive to act, which is Mars, and there have been so many squares from this position in Aquarius over to Uranus that it's not going to be out of the blue, but what will be sudden is our drive to act on it and an urgent need for freedom or change, right? Now, the last time Mars was in a square to Uranus was when Mars was in Leo, and that was on July 13th, 2024. Okay, now on the geopolitical stage, that was the assassination attempt at Butler, Pennsylvania. Okay, on a personal level, that was the day that my father, who is a Draco starseed, Draco starseed, that was the day that he finally acknowledged that he was coming into the last weeks of his life, right? And there were things that he said to me that indicated that was a difficult moment, and it was volatile. It was volatile everywhere. And so you have Mercury stationing retrograde, you have the sun and the North Node conjunct, and then at the same time you have this very volatile astrological influence. Now, thankfully, Mars is in Aquarius and not Leo, so the drive to act is much more in the interest of the collective consciousness, not so much in our individual sense. But still, if you're plugged into some sort of Borg hive mind, this can be very, very destructive and very volatile. I just be mindful about this time period in terms of how you act and what's going on around you, and making sure that you're not getting pulled into that volatility, because there's a lot here. And the Mercury retrograde starting, I think, is one of those moments that it might be a wake-up call to be like, okay, do I really have what it takes in order to give myself over to this mission, to this project, to this situation? By this time, I think we'll be really questioning, and we'll be in a first quarter moon phase, which is always a fun time when it comes to crises. It's always a crisis point with the squaring of the quarter moon. So from there, we do come into the lunar eclipse, which I said was on the 3rd of March. It is in Pisces, Virgo, actually. It is a total lunar eclipse, and I don't remember exactly where the shadow of the eclipse is going to be, but just keep in mind that 13 to 14 degrees Pisces and Virgo is a Syrian starseed marking that I would read for. So there's going to be this overlap, and how close it is to where Jupiter is in Cancer, which is basically sitting in alignment with Sirius itself. And so there's going to be something along those lines coming up. And if you're a Syrian starseed, this lunar eclipse is really going to activate something so deep of where you've been and where you're going. And, what's going to wake up when Jupiter stations direct, which is going to be, about a week after this full moon lunar eclipse. And I definitely want to look at that, because that's also a huge thing. So you Sag people out there in particular, you're really going to feel Jupiter stationing direct. I think a lot of Sag people, and you can even see the Black Moon Lilith is in Sagittarius. You're going to see that once we pass the 10th, the moon will be in Sag as that's happening. So that's something else to consider as well, that Sag people, maybe you've been really waiting and things have felt like they haven't been expanding or moving. And I have a feeling that Sag people, once your ruling planet, I should say our ruling planet, once it stations direct in a sign that it is powerful in, which is Cancer, with a moon in Sag, you're really going to start feeling things starting, they're going to start expanding for you. So again, I feel like a Sagittarius energy is related to a fire horse personally, just because Sag is a fire sign and the horse is, the centaur. It's got a lot of Sagittarian connection to it as well. So that's something to consider when Jupiter stations direct, that Sag people are really going to, I think, feel it. But I think we'll all feel it in terms of whatever Sag energy you do have, right? Because the moon will be in Sagittarius. So let's see what else here through March. The big one, like I said, is Jupiter stationing direct. And then we have the vernal equinox, which is on the 20th. Mercury will be direct at this point because it's going to be conjunct to the North Node. And then, boy, oh boy, this is something we'll talk more about next month, or it's certainly the next forecast, but this is a big transit to pay attention to, which is that Saturn in Aries is going to sextile Pluto in Aquarius, and they're both direct when this is happening. And so normally when these larger planets come into these direct aspects, they usually do it a couple times because they're all, they go through their long periods of retrogrades. Well, apparently this is a one-time pass, so this is something worth paying attention to as well. 5 degrees and 5 degrees. This 5 degrees of Aquarius is something that's going to it's going to come back around many times over the course of the next 6 months of where Pluto is, where Saturn and Neptune will be, what else? There's another, Uranus coming into Gemini. When it comes into this position in Gemini, it's going to be in a trine to Pluto, sextile. They're going to have that whole mystical triangle thing happening again. So that's coming down the pipeline. But this Saturn-Pluto sextile, while they're both direct as a one-time pass, it really merges like the discipline of Saturn and the pioneering action of Aries with a very deep societal transformation. And it really helps restructure not only collective systems, but it could be, depending on where Aquarius is in your chart. If you were an Aquarius rising, for instance, this is going to be directly to the deep societal transformation of your own personality. So this helps restructure those collective systems by turning innovative ideas into concrete realities, which is what Saturn represents. And sometimes challenging, but often productive efforts, right? So you're encouraging building something new, something relevant, something sustainable for the future. So constructive innovation, structural transformation, strategic action. That's a big point for this year, is being able to integrate a strategy with where your energy is going, who it's going to, all of that stuff. I mean, a strategy is going to be essential, because without a strategy and you're just flying off the handle, you're just wasting your energy, and chances are you're not actually going to be able to fulfill whatever it is you're going for. So strategy is going to be really important, and something like this type of transit is going to be really important. Balancing power, right? This is a time when dedication and commitment to goals runs very high. And we can be very consistently productive, right? Because this is a transit that's not going to just be a one-off in a day. It's going to build over days, and then it's going to taper off over days. So by the end of, as we get into the end of March, this is going to start building, and we can see ourselves and our purpose really clearly. This is going to be a really important moment. Now, we'll be into the next lunar cycle. The next new moon will be on the 18th of March, and then we come into the vernal equinox. So by the time we get here, we'll be out of the eclipse window, and it'll be full speed ahead in a lot of cases. It's a really good time to cultivate things like patience and eliminate what's not necessary, right? Dedicate ourselves to research or counseling, self-understanding. And I think that has a lot to do with the Pluto element, right? Because Pluto, as an agent of transformation, usually leads us into that self-understanding. So we develop self-discipline, and it can be very rewarding, and we narrow our focus. And that's, again, going to be a big theme for this year, is to narrow the focus into exactly what we want to channel this intense energy into. So making the most of things is also a huge theme, and being resourceful with this Saturn Pluto sextile. So yes, it's like by the time we get to April, Uranus will come into Gemini. Early May is when Pluto stations retrograde. Now, when we get into June, some important things that happen are, let's see here, that Uranus is going to square the nodes, so that's going to be pretty volatile in its own way, just because Uranus is that agent of rapid, unexpected change in a T-square to the nodes of the moon, or the soul's journey. So that's going to throw things off, I'm sure. And then as we go through June, Chiron comes into Taurus. We have another Mercury retrograde at the end of June, and then we have July. And I've already gone into basically just that July is going to be cray. Neptune will station retrograde on the 7th of July as well. And then all of that mystical triangle stuff is going to be happening mid-July. And then you're going to have Jupiter joining the conversation in July as it comes into Leo as well. Saturn will retrograde. And by the time we get to August, not only will Chiron station retrograde in Taurus, so it'll go back into Aries, but we're also going to see the nodes. So we'll go ahead again. We're going to see the nodes move into Aquarius and Leo. And so the things that are being initiated and deeply embedded right now with this eclipse are going to be much more noticeable come July into August, like I said. So this time period, especially right now during this eclipse window, is very important in terms of really being honest with ourselves, preparing ourselves, shoring up the loose ends about, where we want to channel our energy, being very focused on what we want to put our energy into. If we need to work more on getting our energy more balanced, getting our nervous system more balanced, this is the time to do it. Okay, because that's going to translate out into July, when things are just like, it's so intense and explosive that if you're not doing anything right now, it will just run you over. So I think that's plenty of information to work with for this eclipse season and fire horse, beginning of this fire horse year. So normally I'd be like, hey, book a personal forecast, but they're all booked. So I'm finishing them out this week. And other than my Catalyst membership responsibilities, I am taking a well-deserved break from anything. It's been a lot of very focused energy in a very short amount of time to get this report together, to do all the research, to do all the forecasts. So if you want to know what's going on in the near future, you can always get on the mailing list through the website, and that's linked in the description box. If you're interested in continuing to address these issues to get more support, you can consider Catalyst membership, and that's also linked in the description box below, and see what that entails. There's 2 energy readings a month. If you're a premium member, you get your own personal reading every month or so. You get a dedicated discount code for all the services in the store, except for the packages, and some pretty regular check-ins about what's going on, just to help round out your own process. So, my friends, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourself as we move through this eclipse window and the beginning of the year of the fire horse. I hope everybody is got their sights on exactly what it is they want to be working on, what their goals are, and prepared for things that may not be expected. One of the things that has been coming through, not only for me personally, but when I received my own reading from Kiana, the Cosmic Priestess, shout out to her amazing work. And I've done some events with her, so I'll link her website somewhere as well. That, there are things that we can't know, right? That either if we knew them, we would sabotage ourselves, or there are things that just haven't clicked into place yet. And so there's no way to really see the full pattern. And so we have to put at least some trust in spirit to guide us when the time is right. And so even if we have our own goals, if we have our own trajectory of what we're working on, just accepting the fact that things may not exactly look the way that we want them to look or think they should look. And it's usually in those unexpected rapid changes that we end up growing and learning the most. And so and that's why managing our nervous system is so important right now. So again, I encourage you to do whatever it is that speaks to you personally, to do that and to implement that into your daily life, and not keep that as something separate from your day to day, and make it something that is a priority, right? Make it a priority. All right, guys. Well, enjoy the eclipses. Enjoy the year of the fire horse. It's going to be exciting. It certainly won't be boring. We're going to be living in a new world come this time next year. So let me know if you need anything. You know how to get a hold of me. And if you don't, it's all in the description box below. I really appreciate you all so very much. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you on the next video.